I'll never forget the day I discovered the truth, the day my world quietly collapsed while everyone else seemed blissfully unaware. I was sipping my morning coffee, the aroma of freshly brewed beans mixing with the faint smell of toast burning slightly in the kitchen. The sun had just begun to filter through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the counter, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a photo. Lily, my twin sister, smiling with Noah, my best friend, dressed in their wedding attire. My stomach dropped, my hands trembled. I had known them both my entire life, trusted them with my secrets, and loved them in ways I thought were unshakable. And yet here they were, hiding a marriage from me for years. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the photo as if it would somehow explain itself, but it didn't. There was no caption, no apology, just a cheerful image that tore through my chest like glass. I had suspected nothing. We had celebrated birthdays, holidays, even family vacations together. How could they have kept something so monumental from me? I remembered the small signs I'd brushed off over the years. Missed phone calls from Noah, secretive whispers between him and Lily, the sudden weekend trips they insisted I couldn't join. I had chalked it up to adult independence, work obligations, or just private time they deserved. But now, each of those tiny moments formed a trail of deception I hadn't noticed, a trail I had unknowingly ignored. I spent that morning in a daze. I couldn't bring myself to speak to anyone yet, not even my parents, not even my closest friend. I just sat at the kitchen table, holding my coffee mug, staring at the photo, letting the shock wash over me. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant chatter of neighbors going about their day. Everything was normal, everything except my life, which now felt fractured in a way I couldn't articulate. Eventually, I knew I had to confront them. Not yet today. I needed to collect my thoughts, organize my emotions, and prepare for the conversation I had dreamed about, but dreaded in equal measure. My heart felt like it was both pounding and hollow at the same time, and my hands still shook as I scrolled through old messages, looking for any sign that might have hinted at this betrayal. There was none. Noah had been my confidant since high school. I had told him things I hadn't told anyone else. My fears, my ambitions, even the most intimate secrets about my heart. Lily was my twin. I had shared every milestone, every heartbreak, every dream with her. And they had hidden this. By the time the afternoon sun hung low in the sky, I was pacing around my apartment trying to figure out what to do. Should I call them both at the same time? Should I confront them separately? Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to cry, and a small part of me wanted to disappear completely. But I knew I couldn't. I had to face them. I texted Lily first, a simple message. We need to talk. Now. No emojis, no softness, just the raw urgency of someone whose trust had been broken. She responded within minutes. Okay, I'll come over. I felt a flicker of relief, but also a pang of fear. Seeing her face, hearing her voice, I didn't know if I would be able to stay composed. When she arrived, her eyes were filled with an emotion I couldn't identify at first. Guilt, perhaps, or fear, or maybe the weight of years of secret keeping. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Emma, she said softly, I know why you called. I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at her, noticing the small details I had always loved. The curl of her hair, the familiar tilt of her head, the warmth that used to be unguarded and easy to share. Now it felt like a stranger was sitting across from me. I saw the photo, I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. You and Noah married, and I can't believe you kept this from me. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Emma, I didn't know how to tell you. We were scared. Scared of how you would react. Scared of losing you if you were angry. I never wanted to hurt you. But her words felt hollow, fear didn't justify secrecy of this magnitude. The tears, the excuses, they were just words. I had lost the trust that had defined my relationship with both of them, and words alone couldn't mend it. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. The details of my life, the smell of toast, the sunlight on the floor, even the sound of the city outside, all blending together as my mind raced. I had to process this betrayal slowly, methodically, or I might say something I would regret. For the first time in my life, I felt completely adrift. I realized that the world I had built around my family, my sister, my best friend, and my sense of normalcy no longer existed. It had been quietly dismantled piece by piece by the people I trusted most. And now I had to figure out how to navigate this new reality, one where the people I loved had hidden the truth for years, and my own sense of security and belonging had been shattered. As night fell, I sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. I wrapped my arms around myself, drawing in deep, shuddering breaths. I had no answers, no clear path forward, only the raw, aching knowledge that my life had changed forever. And in that aching, I understood something vital. I had to survive this, not just for myself, but to reclaim my power, my voice, and my sense of who I was in a world that now felt unfamiliar and unsteady. The storm had only just begun. The morning after confronting Lily, I woke with a dull ache in my chest, the kind that doesn't just fade with sleep or coffee. The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, and the faint hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. I tried to focus on something else. My work, a book, even the radio playing softly in the background. But my mind kept returning to that photo, that image of them smiling in their wedding attire, hiding a life I had never known existed. I realized quickly that I couldn't just sit and stew. I needed to understand how far this had gone. How long had they been married? How many moments, holidays, or personal milestones had they deliberately hidden from me? I knew I had to piece together the timeline, the secret threads of their lives, to make sense of the betrayal. I started with small observations. Over the years, had there been odd trips that Noah or Lily had taken separately? Conversations that ended abruptly? Invitations I hadn't received? Slowly, I began to remember subtle, almost invisible clues that I had brushed off at the time. Noah's phone going silent during family dinners, with him giving vague excuses about work. Lily disappearing for hours on weekends, claiming errands or personal projects. Both of them occasionally glancing at each other with that strange, shared smile I couldn't quite place. At the time, I had dismissed these moments as inconsequential. Now they painted a clearer picture, a mosaic of secrecy and deception that spanned years. I also revisited old messages, scrolling through text threads, emails, and chat apps. It was exhausting combing through conversations for hints I might have missed. At first, I didn't find much, just casual banter, jokes, and ordinary life talk. But then I noticed a pattern. Vague references to events or trips they had taken together that were never mentioned to me. A weekend getaway to the mountains, a concert, a dinner party with mutual friends, all seemingly innocuous but carefully concealed. The realization hit me harder than I expected. They had constructed an entire parallel life, a life in which I had no part. And the betrayal wasn't just in the marriage, it was in the intentional exclusion, the deliberate hiding, the erosion of trust over time. I decided I needed answers, and I couldn't rely solely on memory or deduction. I reached out to mutual friends, gently probing for information without revealing my knowledge of their marriage. Some responded carefully, hesitant to betray confidences. Others offered snippets that confirmed my worst suspicions. The wedding had taken place years ago, in a small, intimate ceremony. No announcements, no celebrations, no acknowledgement of me as Lily's twin or Noah's best friend. Each piece of information was a stab, but also a key to understanding. The puzzle was coming together, revealing the scope of their deception. And with understanding came a slow-burning anger, not explosive, but steady, the kind that sharpens focus and fuels resolve. I confronted Lily again, not angrily, but with a calm determination I hadn't known I possessed. I've talked to people, Lily. I know when it happened, who knew, and how carefully you hid it. I need you to be honest with me now. Everything. No more lies. Her eyes welled up again, but this time there was a flicker of resignation. I wanted to tell you so many times, but every time I tried, something held me back. I thought you wouldn't understand, that it would ruin everything between us. I know now that hiding it was the biggest mistake of my life. I listened, the weight of her words pressing against me. They were sincere, but sincerity didn't erase the betrayal. Years of secrecy had consequences, and those consequences were mine to navigate. The next days saw a shift in their behavior. Noah stopped coming by unannounced, respecting the distance I had created. Lily began answering questions honestly, without hesitation or deflection. Even their interactions with mutual friends became more cautious, more transparent. It was as if the revelation had forced a recalibration of their lives, one in which deception could no longer thrive. I, too, was changing. The anger, heartbreak, and disbelief were still there, but alongside them was clarity. I could finally see the situation for what it was, a betrayal of trust, not just of love or friendship, but of the foundational bond we had shared. And with clarity came a renewed sense of control. I would not be consumed by their actions. I would respond deliberately, protecting myself while still navigating the emotional fallout. The most difficult moments were the quiet ones, the spaces in between conversations when my mind replayed memories, imagining alternative realities where this betrayal had never occurred. I would sit on my balcony, the wind brushing against my skin, watching the city lights shimmer and puddles from a recent rain, and let the emotions wash over me. Anger, sadness, confusion, all mixed with a stubborn determination to emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. I began journaling, not just to vent, but to organize my thoughts and clarify my feelings. Each entry became a roadmap of my emotional journey. Recollections of pain, observations about their actions, reflections on my reactions, and notes about the boundaries I wanted to establish moving forward. It was a slow process, but it grounded me, giving me a sense of agency in a situation where I had once felt powerless. By the end of the second week, I realized something profound. While I couldn't change the past, I could control how I moved forward. I didn't have to forgive yet. I didn't have to reconcile, and I didn't have to erase the pain. But I could reclaim my life, my sense of self, and my ability to navigate relationships with honesty, intention, and resilience. And so I prepared for the next step, a confrontation not fueled by rage, but by clarity, aimed at seeking accountability and understanding rather than revenge. It would not be easy, but I knew it was necessary. The betrayal had been unveiled, the clues pieced together, and now it was time to face the reality fully, to confront the consequences, both public and private, and to determine how I would protect myself while still navigating the complex ties of family and friendship. The storm was far from over, but I was no longer adrift. I had a direction, and I was ready to step into it. The morning I decided to confront Noah, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. My hands were clammy as I dialed his number, the ringtone sounding almost alien in the quiet of my apartment. When he answered, his voice was casual at first, easy, familiar, but I could hear the subtle tension underneath, the same tension I had felt for weeks, simmering like a storm about to break. "Emma," he said, a hint of hesitation in his tone. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said bluntly. "Everything is not okay. I know about the marriage. I know about the years you and Lily hid it from me. I need answers, Noah. Not excuses, not apologies, answers." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him breathing, weighing how to respond. "Emma, His voice faltered, the familiar confidence stripped away. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love Lily, and we didn't know how to tell you without causing pain." "Pain?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly, though I tried to keep it calm. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out your best friend and your twin sister have been lying to you for years? To have your trust manipulated, your place in their lives erased?" He was silent, and I could feel my own pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him until he truly understood the weight of what he had done. Instead, I exhaled slowly, trying to ground myself. "I need to see you. We need to talk in person." When we finally met, the air was thick with unspoken words. Noah sat across from me at a small cafe, the sunlight catching his face in a way that made him look older, wearier, as though the secret they had carried for so long had aged him prematurely. I studied him carefully, searching for any sign of the friend I had once known. I found glimpses, the familiar curve of his lips, the nervous laugh, but they were overshadowed by the tension of betrayal. "I don't understand why you didn't tell me," I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my efforts to remain composed. "We shared everything. Why hide something this important?" He swallowed hard. "I was scared," he admitted, voice low. "Scared you'd hate me. Scared you'd hate Lily. Scared I'd lose both of you. I didn't know how to make it right." I shook my head, anger and hurt twisting in my chest. "Scared? Do you have any idea what it feels like to be left out of the life of the people you love most? To have your trust manipulated, your place in their lives erased?" He was silent, and I could feel my own pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him until he truly understood the weight of what he had done. Instead, I exhaled slowly, trying to ground myself. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I do know that I need honesty from this point forward. No more secrets, no more lies. And I need time to process, to understand, and to decide how I want to engage with both of you moving forward." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand," he said simply. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." But again, words alone were insufficient. Actions would be required. Consistent, transparent, and patient actions. I would watch, I would listen, and I would determine if trust could ever be rebuilt. The confrontation with Noah also forced me to reflect on my own feelings. Betrayal had a complicated way of mingling with love and loyalty. I realized that despite everything, I still cared deeply for both of them. It was not a simple matter of anger or hurt. It was grief for the relationships I thought I had, for the trust that had been shattered, and for the innocence of a bond that had been quietly broken over time. I spent the evening alone, walking through familiar streets, the city alive with sounds of life around me. Children laughed in the park, car horns echoed in the distance, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted from a nearby bakery. Life went on outside, indifferent to my pain, and I found a strange comfort in that. A reminder that while their betrayal had shaken my world, it had not destroyed it. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I was more cautious, more observant, and more deliberate in my interactions. I questioned my assumptions, reconsidered the ease with which I trusted, and began to establish boundaries that felt necessary for my emotional survival. I didn't avoid them entirely, but I carefully navigated encounters, maintaining a balance between accountability and self-protection. I also began reconnecting with friends outside the immediate circle. Conversations that had once felt casual now took on deeper meaning. I shared some of the story, not every detail, but enough to feel heard, validated, and supported. Friends offered perspective, encouragement, and reminders that my feelings were justified. It was in these interactions that I realized I was not alone and that I could rebuild my sense of trust and belonging gradually, even after such profound betrayal. Through this process, I began to understand a vital truth. Healing was not about erasing the past or forcing forgiveness. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, establishing boundaries, and allowing myself to feel, process, and move forward. I could control my actions, my perspective, and my response, even if I could not control theirs. And that realization, as small as it seemed, was a source of strength I had not anticipated. As the weeks went on, I slowly allowed myself to hope, not for reconciliation or immediate forgiveness, but for a future where honesty, clarity, and self-respect guided my relationships. The storm of betrayal was not yet fully behind me, but I had found my footing, my voice, and my resolve. The weeks after confronting Noah and Lily were some of the hardest I had ever endured. I realized that their secrecy hadn't just hurt me privately. It had implications for everyone around us. Friends, family, even casual acquaintances who had trusted me as a reliable presence in their lives now saw me differently, because the reality of their hidden marriage had rippled outward like stones dropped into a calm lake. I remember one afternoon vividly. My mother called, her voice hesitant, heavy with concern. "Emma, we didn't know, honey. We wish we had known sooner." Her words, though kind, made me ache. I had grown up believing family was unshakable, that secrets like these simply didn't exist among us. Now I knew differently. And the heartbreak wasn't just about betrayal by my sister and my best friend. It was about the fragile trust that held our entire family together. Navigating these conversations with others was delicate. People wanted answers, but the truth was complicated, messy, and emotionally charged. I tried to explain without dramatizing, to convey my feelings honestly, while resisting the urge to vent all the raw anger I carried inside. Some understood immediately. Others struggled to reconcile the image of my seemingly happy, close-knit family with the reality I now lived. Through it all, I noticed a subtle shift in my own perspective. I was no longer just a hurt sister, the betrayed friend. I was also the witness to a series of choices that had consequences, the observer of human flaws, and the guardian of my own emotional well-being. In a strange way, the betrayal forced me to grow, to step into a space of emotional maturity I had never fully inhabited before. One particularly difficult encounter was with our mutual friends, the ones who had been privy to bits and pieces of the secret. I met with them at a small cafe, the sunlight soft on the polished wood table. They avoided eye contact at first, hesitant to acknowledge the tension. Finally, one of them spoke. "Emma, we tried to tell you, but they made us promise not to say anything." It was frustrating, yes, but also enlightening. I realized that their silence wasn't malice, it was fear, complicity, and the weight of their loyalty to Lily and Noah. And I understood, too, that relationships could be complicated in ways that weren't black and white. People made mistakes, people hid things, but it didn't excuse the hurt they caused. The public consequences of their secrecy became more apparent at family gatherings. Holidays were awkward, filled with careful small talk and measured smiles. I had to navigate a minefield of questions, speculation, and assumptions. But instead of allowing myself to be swept up in the drama, I began setting boundaries. I answered only what I needed to, focused on my own emotional stability, and allowed myself to step away when tensions rose. It was empowering in a way I hadn't anticipated. For so long, I had felt at the mercy of their actions, blindsided, reactive, and emotionally vulnerable. Now I was choosing my responses deliberately. I was learning to assert myself, to control my presence in spaces where I had previously felt powerless, and to maintain dignity even amidst chaos. Even Lily and Noah's interactions changed. There was an unspoken tension, a carefulness in their gestures and words. I realized that transparency now required accountability, not just from me, but from them too. Every interaction had weight, every conversation carried meaning. And while I didn't seek to punish them, I knew I had to observe their actions carefully. Trust, once broken, can only be rebuilt slowly, if at all. I also took time to reflect privately. Alone in my apartment, the quiet broken only by the occasional distant car horn or bird song, I journaled. I wrote about my emotions, my thoughts, the questions I still had. Each page became a space to process, a way to untangle the knots of hurt, betrayal, and lingering confusion. Through writing, I found clarity, a roadmap for navigating the days ahead. During this period, I discovered the importance of self-care in a deeper way than ever before. I spent mornings walking in the park, breathing in crisp air, letting the sun warm my face. I cooked meals I enjoyed, listened to music that soothed my soul, and allowed myself moments of quiet reflection without guilt. Slowly, the emotional weight began to lift. Not entirely, but enough that I could see possibilities beyond pain. I also reconnected with friends outside the immediate circle of betrayal. Conversations were genuine, laughter was easier, and I began to rebuild a sense of trust in my social world. It was humbling and comforting to realize that while some relationships were fractured, others were resilient and nourishing. These connections reminded me that life extended beyond the hurt, and that I could create spaces of safety and honesty around myself. The experience also prompted introspection about my own values. I considered what trust, honesty, and loyalty truly meant to me, and how I wanted to navigate relationships moving forward. The betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it also illuminated the qualities I valued most: transparency, respect, and authenticity. I realized that I could no longer take these for granted, and that my future connections would require careful attention to these principles. By the end of this phase, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The storm had left damage, yes, but it had also revealed strength, resilience, and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. I had learned to set boundaries, to navigate conversations with poise, and to protect my emotional well-being without shutting the world out entirely. The betrayal had altered my life irrevocably, but it had also provided a foundation upon which I could rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. After weeks of processing, I realized that reclaiming my life meant more than just confronting Lily and Noah. It meant rebuilding my own world, brick by brick. I couldn't stay trapped in the shadow of their deception forever. I needed to find stability, joy, and purpose again, independent of the betrayal that had consumed me for so long. I started small. Mornings became mine, a quiet ritual of tea, journaling, and reflection before the day began. I took long walks through the city streets, noticing details I'd overlooked before: the rustle of leaves in the park, the laughter of children playing, the smell of coffee from the corner cafe. Life was moving forward, and I wanted to move with it, not against it. Work became a refuge. I poured myself into projects, focusing on creativity and problem solving, letting the satisfaction of accomplishment remind me that my value wasn't defined by Lily or Noah's choices. Colleagues noticed a new steadiness in me, a calm focus, a quiet confidence that had been absent in the weeks immediately following the revelation. Yet, Even amidst productivity, the emotional weight lingered. There were moments when I would catch myself replaying memories, birthday parties, shared vacations, late-night conversations, all now tinged with the realization that a significant part of those moments had been constructed around deception. I had to remind myself to pause, breathe, and separate the joy I felt in those memories from the betrayal that accompanied them. Setting boundaries with Lily and Noah was perhaps the most challenging part. I wanted honesty, transparency, and accountability, but I also wanted to protect my emotional well-being. I limited interactions, insisted on clarity, and made sure that conversations happened in settings where I felt safe, my apartment, public spaces, or via phone when necessary. One evening, Lily came over unannounced, holding a small bouquet of flowers. She said softly, "I just wanted to see you." I gestured to the couch. "We need to talk, yes, but you need to respect my space. I can't just let things slide as if nothing happened." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know, Emma. I'm sorry. I miss having my sister in my life." "I miss you too," I admitted, my voice gentle but firm. "But I need time. I need to rebuild trust, and that won't happen overnight." The conversation was long, sometimes uncomfortable, often emotional, but it set a precedent. Honesty and patience would guide our interactions, not secrecy or fear. I realized that while reconciliation might eventually be possible, it would be on my terms and timeline. Noah reached out less frequently, respecting the boundaries I had established. When we did speak, the conversations were careful but civil. I had no desire to burn bridges unnecessarily, but I needed space to heal without constant reminders of the betrayal. It was liberating in a way to assert control over the narrative of my own life. During this period, I also reconnected with friends I had drifted from over the years. We laughed, shared stories, and reminded each other of the value of genuine connection. Their presence was a balm, a reminder that not all relationships were tainted by deception, and that trust, when nurtured carefully, could exist again. One afternoon, while walking through the park, I reflected on how far I had come. I could still feel the ache of betrayal, but it no longer defined me. I had transformed it into awareness, caution, and resilience. The pain had been real, but it had also illuminated my capacity for strength, reflection, and deliberate action. I realized that rebuilding my life wasn't just about managing relationships with Lily and Noah. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, the confidence to trust carefully, the courage to set boundaries, and the awareness to prioritize my emotional health above the expectations or actions of others. I also began exploring new experiences. I signed up for a photography class, something I had always wanted to try but never pursued. Capturing moments through a lens allowed me to see beauty in unexpected places, and it reminded me that life, despite betrayal, was still full of possibility. I felt pride in small accomplishments, learning new skills, connecting with classmates, and observing the world through a fresh perspective. This process of rebuilding was slow, deliberate, and intentional. Every choice I made, from the way I spent my mornings to the boundaries I set with Lily and Noah, was a statement of self-respect. I realized that betrayal, while painful, had inadvertently guided me toward deeper self-awareness and personal growth. By the end of this phase, I could acknowledge a new truth. My life was no longer dictated by deception or betrayal. I had established my boundaries, reclaimed my emotional space, and begun exploring paths that were truly mine. Lily and Noah were part of my story, yes, but they no longer controlled its course. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of quiet empowerment. The storm of betrayal had passed, leaving scars, but also revealing resilience, clarity, and strength I hadn't known I possessed. I was ready to continue rebuilding with honesty, self-respect, and a renewed focus on the life I wanted to live, free from the shadow of lies. As the weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes in Lily and Noah's behavior. They were more careful now, almost tentative, as if they were constantly aware of the consequences of their past actions. It was strange to watch. The friends I had known for years had been transformed by guilt, secrecy, and now accountability. I could see them trying to navigate a world they had once taken for granted, and it was both satisfying and unsettling. I started testing boundaries in small ways. I would ask questions that required honesty, observe their reactions, and set limits on what I was willing to tolerate. It wasn't about punishment. I wasn't seeking revenge, but about reclaiming control and ensuring that I wouldn't be blindsided again. Every boundary I set was a statement. My trust had to be earned, and deception would no longer be tolerated. The first test came during a group dinner with mutual friends. I had prepared myself mentally, knowing that the tension between all of us would be palpable. I noticed how Lily hesitated before answering questions about past trips, and how Noah avoided eye contact when certain topics arose. I asked gently, "Was there anything about your wedding you wanted to share? Anything I should know?" For a moment, they exchanged glances, the kind that spoke volumes without words. Then Lily took a deep breath and said, "We should have told you sooner. We know that now. We're sorry." Her words were sincere, but I didn't allow myself to relax completely. Apologies alone weren't enough. Actions mattered. Over the course of the evening, I observed how they interacted, whether they were open and truthful or fell back into old patterns of subtle concealment. By the end of the night, I felt cautiously reassured. They were trying, genuinely trying, and that effort mattered. At home, I reflected on how much I had changed. The betrayal had left scars, yes, but it had also strengthened my emotional intelligence. I was more aware of people's motives, more cautious with trust, and better at protecting my own boundaries. I realized that the lessons I had learned from their deception weren't just about Lily and Noah. They were about life, relationships, and the importance of self-respect. I also noticed a shift in how others perceived the situation. Mutual friends who had once avoided conflict began to respect my clarity and assertiveness. They saw that I wasn't reacting impulsively or letting emotions control me. I was navigating the fallout with thoughtfulness, patience, and maturity. That respect, as small as it seemed, was empowering. One afternoon, I received a message from one of our close friends, someone who had been caught in the middle of the deception. They wrote, "Emma, I just want you to know, we see how strong you're being. It's not easy, and we admire the way you're handling this." Reading those words brought a mix of relief and validation. I wasn't just surviving, I was growing, evolving, and demonstrating resilience in the face of deep betrayal. Despite this growth, there were moments of raw emotion. I would catch myself replaying memories of holidays, birthday celebrations, or quiet nights with Noah and Lily, each one now tinged with the knowledge that a significant part of those experiences had been hidden from me. I allowed myself to feel sadness and anger, but I refused to let them dominate my life. Instead, I used these emotions as fuel for reflection, learning, and setting stronger boundaries for the future. I also began exploring activities that nourished my soul and strengthened my independence. Photography became a personal project. Capturing small moments of beauty reminded me that life, even after betrayal, could hold joy and wonder. I took weekend trips alone, immersing myself in nature, walking trails I had never explored, and feeling the freedom of moving through the world on my own terms. Through these experiences, I discovered a new sense of identity, one that was not defined by relationships or the actions of others, but by my choices, values, and ability to navigate life with integrity. The betrayal had taught me the importance of self-reliance and emotional clarity. lessons I intended to carry forward. At family gatherings, I practiced assertiveness. I no longer allowed uncomfortable questions or veiled accusations to go unchallenged. I politely but firmly redirected conversations, ensuring that my emotional boundaries were respected. Watching Lily and Noah navigate the social consequences of their secret marriage was bittersweet. I felt validation, yes, but also a lingering sadness for the relationships that had been strained, perhaps permanently. One evening, I sat on my balcony, the cool night air brushing my skin, the city lights flickering below. I reflected on the journey so far, the betrayal, the confrontation, the testing of boundaries, and the slow rebuilding of trust and self-respect. I realized that while the wounds would not disappear overnight, the strength I had cultivated would guide me through the coming months and years. I thought about the moral of my journey. Trust is sacred, but self-respect is non-negotiable. Betrayal teaches hard lessons, but those lessons can transform us if we allow them to. I could forgive if I chose, reconcile if I wished, but my first obligation was to myself, to my peace, my clarity, and my emotional health. By the end of this phase, I felt a cautious sense of empowerment. Lily and Noah were part of my life, yes, but their actions no longer controlled my emotions. I had learned to navigate social circles with clarity, set firm boundaries, and prioritize honesty above all. The betrayal had changed my relationships, but it had also revealed resilience, emotional intelligence, and strength I hadn't known I possessed. The storm was still in my past, but its lessons had become tools for the future, guiding me toward a life defined by intention, self-respect, and careful trust. I felt ready to continue, to rebuild, and to embrace a life where honesty and integrity were non-negotiable. By the time weeks had passed, I had begun to feel a cautious sense of normalcy returning to my life. Not everything was resolved. The sting of betrayal lingered, and my trust in Lily and Noah was still fragile. But I was learning to navigate interactions with them without letting anger or heartbreak dominate my emotions. I was reclaiming my narrative, and with it, my sense of power. One evening, Lily called. Her voice was tentative, almost fragile. "Emma, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner this week, just the three of us. I know it's awkward, but I think we need to try." I paused, considering. Part of me wanted to refuse outright to protect myself from potential hurt, but another part, the part that still loved my sister and valued the history we shared, wanted to test the waters of reconciliation. "Okay," I said, finally. "We can try, but I need honesty, Lily. No more secrets." Dinner that night was awkward at first. The restaurant was quiet, intimate, the hum of conversation around us a soft backdrop to our tense exchange. I studied both of them carefully, noting the subtle gestures, Lily fidgeting with her napkin, Noah's eyes darting toward mine, almost as if gauging my reaction. I reminded myself to breathe, to stay grounded, and to observe, rather than react impulsively. We began with small talk, work, mutual friends, and shared memories. It felt safe at first, almost normal, until a question about a past trip arose. I watched Lily hesitate, a shadow crossing her face. That hesitation sparked something inside me, a reminder of the pain caused by their secrecy. I chose my words carefully. "Lily, I need honesty. I want to hear what actually happened without edits or omissions." She looked down, took a deep breath, and nodded. "You're right. We should have told you sooner. I'm sorry, Emma. I truly am. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was only protecting myself and us." Noah reached across the table, gently placing a hand on hers. "We made a mistake. I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but I want you to know that everything we hid wasn't because we didn't care. It was fear and cowardice." Hearing those words, I felt a mixture of emotions: validation, sadness, and a cautious hope. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and deciding how to move forward without allowing the betrayal to define my future. After dinner, we walked together to a nearby park. The evening air was crisp, and the city lights shimmered on wet pavement from a recent drizzle. We talked about memories, childhood moments, and shared experiences. The laughter, tentative at first, then gradually warmer, more genuine. I began to see glimpses of the sister I had known, and the friend I had once trusted. I reminded myself to proceed slowly. Trust once broken cannot be rebuilt hastily. Each moment of honesty, each gesture of transparency was a brick in the foundation of a new relationship, one that required patience, observation, and boundaries. The days following that dinner were filled with careful interactions. I allowed myself to attend small social gatherings with them, keeping conversations grounded and focused. I noticed how much effort they were putting into being transparent, and it mattered. Actions, not words alone, were the measure of sincerity. I also continued to focus on myself. Photography classes, solo walks, and journaling became my anchor. These activities reminded me that while betrayal had altered my life, it didn't control it. I could find joy, growth, and peace independent of their choices. Each step forward was a testament to resilience, a declaration that I would not allow the past to define my future. One afternoon, while reviewing photos I had taken on a recent city walk, I realized something profound. Life continues even after betrayal. The moments of beauty, connection, and personal achievement are not erased by others' mistakes. I began to see that rebuilding trust with Lily and Noah was not just about them, it was also about reclaiming my ability to connect, to love, and to engage authentically with those I cared about. Family gatherings became less tense over time. I learned to assert myself gracefully, redirecting conversations that veered toward discomfort, and allowing myself to enjoy the presence of others without being pulled into old patterns of anger or hurt. Observing Lily and Noah navigating the social consequences of their past actions was strange. Validation mingled with lingering sorrow, but I knew that my role was not to punish them, only to protect my own well-being. I also reflected privately on what I had learned. The betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also illuminated my strength, emotional intelligence, and ability to navigate complex human relationships. I realized that my own growth was perhaps the most important outcome of this experience. I could forgive if I chose to, I could reconcile if it made sense, but I no longer needed anyone else's approval or honesty to define my life. By the end of this phase, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment. Lily and Noah were part of my life again, cautiously and with effort, but they no longer controlled my emotions. I had reclaimed my voice, my boundaries, and my sense of self. The betrayal had left scars, yes, but it had also revealed resilience and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. I realized that healing was not linear, but it was possible. I had begun to navigate relationships with honesty, patience, and self-respect. I had begun to rebuild my life, not just in response to betrayal, but as a deliberate, intentional choice to embrace a future defined by integrity, strength, and personal growth. As months passed, I began to feel a sense of stability returning to my life, the kind that had nothing to do with Lily or Noah, and everything to do with reclaiming my own sense of self. I realized that the betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also been a catalyst, forcing me to recognize my own strength, resilience, and clarity. Slowly, I was rebuilding a life that was no longer defined by their choices or deceit. I immersed myself further in personal projects. Photography remained a source of solace, but I also explored cooking, joining a small community class where I met other women who shared similar interests. These interactions were refreshing, reminding me that trust, connection, and friendship could exist beyond betrayal. Each new experience reinforced the idea that my life was not limited to the shadow of the past. It was expansive, vibrant, and entirely mine to shape. Lily and Noah remained in my life, but our interactions were cautious, deliberate, and measured. I insisted on honesty, clarity, and transparency in every exchange. I noticed how much effort they were putting into respecting these boundaries. And while it didn't erase the pain, it was an important step toward rebuilding some form of trust. One Saturday afternoon, Lily invited me to her apartment. "I want to show you something," she said nervously. When I arrived, she handed me a scrapbook, a collection of memories, photographs, and handwritten notes spanning years of our lives together. "I wanted you to see how much you've always meant to me," she whispered. I flipped through the pages slowly, recognizing the shared laughter, holidays, and milestones that had once brought joy. Tears filled my eyes, not just for the memories, but for the complicated reality they represented. It was bittersweet, a mixture of nostalgia and grief. And yet, in that moment, I felt a glimmer of connection, a fragile thread that had survived even the deepest betrayal. Noah, too, had changed. His interactions were careful, respectful, and genuine. There was no defensiveness, no excuses, only acknowledgement of the past and a desire to demonstrate accountability. I realized that their growth didn't erase what they had done, but it did suggest a path forward where civility, honesty, and mutual respect could exist. Despite these positive developments, I maintained my independence. I continued to explore my own life, spending time with friends, engaging in hobbies, and pursuing opportunities that enriched my sense of self. I knew that my life could no longer revolve around someone else's mistakes. It had to revolve around my choices, values, and growth. One particularly poignant evening, I attended a small family gathering. The room was warm, filled with laughter and conversation, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of genuine peace. Lily and Noah were there, present but unobtrusive, respecting the space I had carved out. I realized that the past couldn't be erased, but the present could be navigated with dignity, honesty, and calm confidence. I took a quiet moment to step outside, feeling the cool night air on my face. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the betrayal, the confrontation, the testing of boundaries, and the slow rebuilding of trust and self-respect. Each stage had been painful, but it had also revealed a resilience and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. During this period, I also began to consider forgiveness in a new light. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or pretending that betrayal hadn't happened. It was about releasing the hold that anger and resentment had over me, allowing me to move forward with peace and intention. I realized that I could forgive, not to absolve their actions, but to free myself from the constant weight of hurt. I also learned to celebrate my progress. I noticed how my confidence had grown, how my boundaries were respected, and how my sense of self had strengthened. The betrayal had been a brutal lesson, yes, but it had also been transformative. I was no longer the same person who had been blindsided. I was wiser, more grounded, and capable of navigating life with intention and awareness. One particularly poignant evening, Lily approached me with a small, heartfelt gesture, a handwritten letter expressing genuine remorse and hope for rebuilding our sisterly bond. I read it carefully, feeling a mixture of sadness, validation, and cautious optimism. I responded honestly, acknowledging the pain, appreciating the effort, and outlining my own expectations for honesty and transparency moving forward. It was clear that reconciliation would be gradual, requiring patience, observation, and intentional effort. But I felt ready to navigate that process with grace, balance, and self-respect. By the end of this phase, I had fully embraced my independence. I had rebuilt trust in myself, restored balance in my life, and approached Lily and Noah with cautious optimism. While the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer controlled my emotions or dictated my actions. I had learned the power of boundaries, the importance of transparency, and the value of self-respect. The storm of deception had passed, leaving damage in its wake, but also revealing resilience, clarity, and emotional strength I hadn't known I possessed. I felt empowered, hopeful, and ready to continue my journey. A journey defined by intention, growth, and the unwavering commitment to live authentically, honestly, and fully. By the time I reached this stage of my journey, I had learned to navigate life with a new sense of clarity and strength. The betrayal, while deeply painful, had become a lens through which I understood myself, my relationships, and the importance of boundaries. I could finally see the road ahead, one where trust, honesty, and self-respect guided my choices. One Saturday morning, I decided to invite Lily and Noah over to my apartment. I wanted a neutral space where we could interact without tension or pressure. I spent the morning cleaning, arranging fresh flowers, and making a simple breakfast. The act of preparing my space felt symbolic. I was reclaiming my environment, creating a setting for calm, honest connection. When they arrived, I noticed the subtle ways their demeanor had shifted over the past months. They were more open, careful, and present. There were no hidden glances, no whispered hesitations, only acknowledgement of the past and willingness to move forward. I welcomed them warmly, but I reminded myself to stay grounded and maintain my boundaries. Breakfast was quiet at first, filled with the sounds of clinking cutlery and muted conversation. I observed them, taking note of their gestures and tones, searching for authenticity. Slowly, the conversation deepened, and they shared reflections on the choices they had made and the lessons they had learned. Lily spoke first. "Emma, I've realized how much my secrecy hurt you. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was only protecting myself. I'm sorry, truly." Noah nodded in agreement. "We made mistakes. We hid what we shouldn't have, and it caused pain. We don't expect forgiveness immediately, but we want to do better, for you and for our relationships moving forward." Hearing those words, I felt a mixture of relief, sadness, and cautious hope. I realized that reconciliation wasn't about forgetting or erasing the past. It was about acknowledgement, accountability, and the gradual rebuilding of trust. I spoke slowly, carefully, choosing each word. "I appreciate your honesty," I said. "It doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives me clarity. Moving forward, I want transparency, patience, and respect. That's how we can rebuild anything, if it's possible." After breakfast, we took a walk in the nearby park. The air was crisp, filled with the smell of damp earth from an early morning drizzle. The city hummed softly around us, a comforting backdrop to a conversation that was both tentative and sincere. I realized that the small moments, the shared smiles, honest words, and mutual effort were laying the foundation for a relationship that could survive, even if, slowly, the shadow of past betrayal. During the walk, we spoke of our childhood, shared memories, and even moments of joy that had not been tainted by secrecy. Laughter came more naturally than I expected, and I felt a faint sense of the sisterly bond I had once cherished. It was fragile, yes, but present. I allowed myself to feel it, cautiously, without letting it override the lessons I had learned. Later that evening, I reflected on the journey so far. I had navigated shock, disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. I had confronted betrayal directly, established boundaries, and gradually rebuilt my sense of self. I realized that while Lily and Noah's actions had caused pain, they had also created an opportunity, a chance to understand my own strength, to cultivate emotional intelligence, and to define the terms of my relationships. I realized that forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave them. It was a choice I made for myself. By forgiving, I freed myself from the constant weight of resentment and anger. I could move forward with clarity, peace, and dignity. I could engage with them authentically without letting the past dominate my emotions. In the days following our breakfast and park walk, I noticed a remarkable shift. Interactions with Lily and Noah became easier, calmer, and more genuine. We communicated openly, checked in regularly, and respected boundaries without tension. The emotional labor was mutual. They had to demonstrate sincerity consistently, and I had to navigate my feelings with care. But gradually, trust, cautious, measured, but real, began to emerge. I also noticed changes in my own life. Work, hobbies, and friendships flourished. I had reclaimed emotional energy that had been drained by betrayal, redirecting it toward growth, creativity, and joy. I felt lighter, more confident, and more attuned to the choices that shaped my life. The storm of deception had passed, and I was beginning to see the world not just as a place of risk, but one of opportunity and connection. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, reflecting on the months that had brought me here. I realized that betrayal, as painful as it was, had revealed strengths I didn't know existed. I had learned patience, discernment, and resilience. I had learned that trust is sacred, boundaries are vital, and self-respect is non-negotiable. Most importantly, I had learned that healing is a process, not a destination. It requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to confront pain directly, rather than allowing it to fester silently. I could now see my life as a series of choices guided by integrity, self-awareness, and emotional clarity. By the end of this phase, I felt a sense of emotional closure. I hadn't forgotten the betrayal, and I hadn't ignored the hurt, but I had integrated those experiences into a narrative of personal growth, resilience, and empowerment. I could engage with Lily and Noah with honesty, patience, and measured trust without letting their past mistakes dictate my emotions. The journey had been long, painful, and transformative, and as I looked forward, I felt hope. Hope for continued personal growth, meaningful relationships, and a life shaped by intention rather than circumstance.
The months following the reconciliation efforts with Lily and Noah were marked by quiet growth and deep reflection. Life no longer felt dictated by their choices or the betrayal that had once consumed me. Instead, I discovered a sense of agency, a quiet power in choosing how I would respond to pain, rebuild trust, and prioritize my own well-being. I continued to embrace my routines, early mornings with tea and journaling, photography sessions that allowed me to capture fleeting beauty, and solo walks where I could reflect and breathe. Each small act reinforced the life I was creating, one defined by intention, clarity, and self-respect. The betrayal had taught me the importance of boundaries, but it had also highlighted the value of joy, connection, and curiosity about the world. One evening, I received a call from Lily. She was calm, her voice measured. "Emma, I wanted to tell you, I'm grateful for your patience, for giving us a chance, and for showing me what honesty and courage look like. I don't take it lightly." I paused, letting her words sink in. "I'm proud of the steps you've taken too. The honesty, the effort, it's visible. But remember, trust is earned every day. Don't take my patience for granted." There was a pause, and then she whispered, "I understand." That simple acknowledgement felt like a small victory, a sign that some bridges, while scarred, could still connect us in meaningful ways. Noah's interactions had become steadier as well. Our conversations were civil, respectful, and grounded. He acknowledged past mistakes without defensiveness, and our exchanges felt honest and human. It was clear that they both had internalized lessons about accountability and the consequences of deception. Observing this growth allowed me to engage without the constant vigilance that had once dominated my thoughts. The most profound change, however, was within me. I no longer felt the same vulnerability that betrayal had exposed. I had learned to navigate hurt
with emotional intelligence, to assess motives with clarity, and to prioritize my mental and emotional health above the whims or mistakes of others. I realized that while Lily and Noah's actions had shaped part of my story, they no longer dictated its trajectory. I had reclaimed authorship of my life. I also began to reflect on forgiveness, fully understanding its true purpose. Forgiveness was not about condoning the actions of others or erasing the past. It was about releasing the grip of resentment, choosing peace over perpetual pain, and allowing oneself to move forward without bitterness. By forgiving, I freed my mind and heart, creating space for joy, growth, and authentic connection. One quiet Sunday, I visited the park where Lily and I had taken that tentative first walk toward reconciliation. The air was cool, scented with early blooms, and children's laughter echoed softly around the paths. I thought about how far I had come, from shock and disbelief to cautious engagement, and finally to a place of clarity, empowerment, and inner peace. I realized that healing had not been linear. There were days of tears, anger, and frustration, moments when I questioned whether reconciliation or trust was even possible. But each step, each boundary, and each act of self-care had brought me closer to emotional wholeness. I had learned that resilience is cultivated through intention, courage, and the willingness to confront pain rather than avoiding it. At home, I pored through my journals, reflecting on the journey from betrayal to healing. I saw the evolution of my thoughts and emotions: shock, grief, anger, cautious curiosity, measured forgiveness, and finally, empowerment. The narrative of betrayal had become part of a larger story, one of growth, self-discovery, and reclamation of life. I wrote a note to myself: you are not defined by their deception. You are defined by your strength, your clarity, and your choices. Life is yours to shape. Even with the scars still present, life began to feel full again. I engaged more freely with friends, pursued hobbies with enthusiasm, and allowed myself moments of joy without guilt. Lily and I shared occasional calls, small visits, and honest conversations. Noah was polite and accountable, and our interactions were cordial, grounded in recognition of past mistakes and mutual effort. The emotional landscape was not perfect, but it was real, sustainable, and healthy. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Trust is sacred but must be earned consistently. Boundaries are vital for emotional well-being. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not necessarily to others. Resilience is cultivated through reflection, patience, and deliberate action. Life is shaped not by others' mistakes, but by your responses to them. These insights became the framework for the life I was building, one of integrity, authenticity, and inner strength. I realized that betrayal, while painful, had ultimately revealed my capacity to grow, heal, and reclaim control. I often think back to the moment when I first discovered their secret, the heartbreak that followed, and the storm of emotions that threatened to consume me. And now, looking back, I feel gratitude, not for the betrayal itself, but for the lessons, resilience, and growth it compelled me to embrace. I had transformed pain into clarity, anger into discernment, and grief into empowerment. In my final reflection, I understood this truth. Life is unpredictable, and people may disappoint or betray, but your strength, clarity, and ability to define your own path remain yours alone. Betrayal can hurt, but it can also illuminate the depth of your resilience. Forgiveness and boundaries create space for peace, and self-respect ensures that no one else can dictate your emotional landscape. As I sipped my evening tea, I smiled softly, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. I knew that while the past would always be part of my story, it would no longer define my future. I was free to live intentionally, honestly, and fully, a life built on clarity, strength, and the unwavering commitment to myself. As I sit here, reflecting on everything that has happened, I can't help but wonder how many of us have faced betrayal and thought it would break us completely. I know I did. I thought I'd never trust again, never laugh freely, never feel at ease in my own life. And yet, here I am, months later, stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. Betrayal is a heavy burden, and it changes you. But it also teaches you lessons that nothing else can. It teaches you the value of honesty, the importance of boundaries, and the power of self-respect. It teaches you to trust carefully, but not to shut your heart entirely. And most importantly, it reminds you that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. I want you to think about your own life for a moment. Are there relationships where honesty has been compromised? Are there people who have let you down, left you feeling small or betrayed? I promise you, you have the power to reclaim your peace, set boundaries, and move forward with dignity. Forgiveness is not about them. It's about freeing yourself, letting go of anger, and choosing clarity over chaos. For me, reconnecting cautiously with Lily and Noah wasn't about erasing the past. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. I learned that my strength comes from how I respond to challenges, how I hold myself accountable, and how I protect my heart while still allowing room for growth and connection. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Life will not always be fair, and people may disappoint or betray you. But your worth, your dignity, and your ability to create a life full of love, honesty, and self-respect are entirely in your hands. Would you have been able to navigate the betrayal and still find peace like I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more real emotional stories that remind us all of the resilience and strength we carry inside.